MonFM, broadcasting to the people of Anglesey. Your voice, your island.
Well, this evening, as I said, our theme is From a Whisper to a Scream. And on the line now, we have the world's leading authority on Led Zeppelin. Please welcome Dave Lewis.
Hi there.
Hi, Dave. How you doing?
I'm good.
Good. So, I've got to ask, how old were you when you got into Led Zeppelin?
Well, it was a long time ago, and it seems like a long time ago. I was 13. I was into music, the Beatles and the Stones and stuff like that, but I used to listen to Pick of the Pops every week, Sunday afternoon, with Alan Freeman, and obviously wanted to keep up with the charts and what was going on. But one particular time in November '69, Alan Freeman played an album track by a band called Led Zeppelin. It was called Whole Lotta Love. It was like nothing I've ever heard before. The Hollies didn't live up to it, and from then on in, I needed to know everything there was to know about this band, and that's how it all started.
Okay, well, 13 is a very, very important age, I think. That is one of the formative kind of years. And whoever you start liking at that kind of point is probably who you'll end up liking throughout your musical life. You know, that's what happened to me, with the Bee Gees and stuff along those lines.
Sure.
So you know. Anyway, why Led Zeppelin though?
Well, I think obviously, their sound was very unique, and there was this chemistry of musicians. This wasn't just a band and some songs, it was much more than that. And I think obviously there weren't a singles band, so you had to buy the album, and Led Zeppelin 2 was the album, Whole Lotta Love was from. So the albums were such a statement, you really could get involved in the album and, engage with the band. And I think that's what Zeppelin had. And there was almost like this secret sort of society with Zeppelin, because they weren't on TV, didn't make singles, you didn't read much about them, and they just did what they did. They seemed to make up their own rules. But when it came to their albums, it was something else. And they could take you to places, I was just a young kid, and the exotic world of rock and roll seemed a long way off, but Led Zeppelin made it live for a lot of people, and I guess seeing them live was a catalyst, which I was lucky enough to do again when I was only 15, when I went to see them play at the Empire Pool, Wembley, in the November '71, and again that was just such a moment, a momentous moment to hear this incredible noise coming out. So it did become pretty quickly a way of life, and I just wanted to know and read and soak up as much as I could about them. But by no means was I the only one. That's a sure fact.
No, their sales were quite phenomenal. And the thing was as well, they were renowned for actually selling huge numbers in advance, and their albums would just kind of go straight in at the top of the charts, wouldn't they? Yeah,
I mean, the great thing about all of their albums was there was such a statement of what they were doing, and the build-up to their album releases was just amazing. I mean, the wait for Led Zeppelin 3, which came out in the 1970, in October 1970, all of that year they were the most talked about band, and they were recording this album, and what was the sleeve going to look like, and and all this stuff, and they just pulled it off. They pulled it off every time, this weight of expectation.
Because normally, the music industry does it like this. They release a single, that becomes a hit, and on the strength of that, the album comes out, and hopefully, that will, emulate what the single's done, and then, a second single will come out, and then a third single. Zeppelin never did that. Zeppelin didn't release a single in the UK, did they?
No, not proper single, no. I mean, I think, again, there was a big word of mouth thing about Zeppelin, and again, people went to their shows. I mean, when I interviewed Peter Grant, their manager, once, he said to me, Led Zeppelin essentially was an in-person band, and I think that was a very sort of telling statement, because it was about seeing them, and it was about talking about them, and it was about sharing this thing. And I think, obviously, because they came up with something different every time, not every album is totally different, is what I'm trying to say. They didn't repeat themselves, they moved on. So by the time you get to the third album, it's not just all about, Marshall amplifiers, there's acoustic numbers.
Yeah, which was a strange thing, because when I was kind of getting into music, like about kind of 77, 78, 79, that kind of time. I did get into like sort of the heavy and the progressive rock and stuff along those lines, but there was two bands like sort of that really kind of terrified me, and they were Black Sabbath and Led Zeppelin, you know. But Zeppelin, like sort of, weren't this terrifying monster of a heavy rock band, were they? Like sort of, you know, this is where like sort of the title of your book, From a Whisper to a Scream, kind of comes in. Like sort of, they were both ends to the scale, weren't they?
Yeah, I mean, you know, the title says everything about what they could do. They went from loud to soft, they went from folk to blues. This was a band with a rock band sort of structure, but within it, they were able to weave so many different influences in, and because they were such seasoned musicians, you've got to remember Jimmy Page had played, you know, since the early 60s. John Paul Jones was a session man. You know, he had great arranging skills. Plant and Bonham had really worked very hard to get where they were coming out of the Midlands. So they'd paid their dues, and that, I think that really paid off. And the fact that when they got in a room and the four of them could create something very special, gave them a lot of breadth of colour. And again, you know, that canvas that they covered was wide. I mean, with huge respect, Black Sabbath, you know, were Black Sabbath. You knew what you were going to get. Well, Led Zeppelin, every album was different, and every album had a surprise and innovation. And, you know, I think that's why people came back, and that's why they became the biggest band that there was, because they never let anybody down. You know, there was always something to like. There was all some new fascination in lots of different ways, not just about the albums, the way they played on stage, presented themselves, the way they looked. Yeah, there was, as we call it was a whole world of Led Zeppelin. You know,
yeah, like it was a package, wasn't it? Like,
yeah, there's music and there's Led Zeppelin.
I like it. Anyway, let's listen to a little bit of music now. This is probably the first Led Zeppelin song that a lot of people heard. This is the opening track from the first album, and quite selfishly, it is one of my favourites. This is, what's it called, Dave?
It's called Good Times, Bad Times.
There we go, let's press the button. There we go, that was the opening track from Led Zeppelin's first album. That was Good Times, Bad Times. Our guest this week is Dave Lewis, author of not just one Led Zeppelin book, but several. How many books about Zeppelin have you written, Dave?
Yeah, there is a fair few. It started in 1983 when I did a book called The Final Acclaim. It wasn't to be The Final Acclaim. And then in 1990 I did Led Zeppelin Celebration. We did Celebration 2. I did a book called The Concert File with Simon Pallet, a big collector of their music, which was a log of every show they did. And then I've self-published myself, Led Zeppelin at Nebworth and Led Zeppelin Over Europe, which is a book about the final tour. And in between that, lots of different other things. And this book, which has just come out, which has been a bit of a rewrite from an earlier version of it. So, yeah, I've been involved in all of that, but principally before that was my magazine, Type of Loose, which still goes today, which was established in 1978. The thing with Zeppelin was they didn't really trust the press that much. I mean, they didn't have a good relationship with the press because a lot of it, you know, there was a lot of slagging off. There was a lot of mistrust and misunderstanding of what they were trying to do. So, and I think the other thing was Led Zeppelin didn't do fan clubs. You know, it wasn't going to be the Osmonds. It was going to be, that wasn't going to happen. So as somebody who wanted to find out information, as I said earlier, I had this passion, and I used to ring up the record company, and you know, I used to try and find out what was going on. I obviously scoured the NME and the Melody Maker, but I also had a bit of a passion to write myself. So I thought, well, you know, why don't I start writing about this band? So Sounds magazine came to me in 1978, and they were running a 4-part piece celebrating 10 years of Led Zeppelin, as it was then, and I got involved in that. It was from that I really thought, you know, I can do more here, and I came up with the idea of doing this fanzine. It was very much based, ironically, on the punk rock sort of principles of do it yourself. So the first one,
done it.
The first one was stapled. The first one was handwritten. I put an advert in Sounds. I sold, I think, 150 in the first week, and I thought, I'm onto something here. So sharing this information was just fantastic, and I guess that's what I've been doing ever since. And I was very lucky at the time that, you know, the management and the band themselves were quite happy for me to get on with it. So it was, you know, it was a perfect marriage, really.
Yeah, great stuff. So anyway, Dave, what colour's your anorak?
My anorak is pink. It's not actually.
Oh dear, we've been called that more than once, haven't we, all of us?
Oh, well, yeah, but I'm quite proud of it.
I don't care either. So anyway, let's sort of talk about this, the new book. As you said, like it's almost like a rewrite of something which happened a long time ago.
Yeah, well, Chris Charles, the editor of Omnibus Press, came to me. We'd done Celebration 2, and we came up with an idea, or one of the ideas in Celebration was to do a track by track, which was quite pioneering at the time. There wasn't a lot of books, you know, there's loads now, and certainly the Beatles' Revolution in My Head came out not long after, and so it was quite a pioneering thing, and we said, why don't we just put all that text into, you know, complete guide books, as they were called, and, you know, the Beatles, the Stones, Pink Floyd, and various others, and that was done. And we did it a couple of times, but, you know, left it alone. I think the last one was in about 2002. But Chris came to me last year and said, you know, should we update it and, you know, have a look at it again? And so we looked at the text, and I said, well, more than that, I think we need to rewrite it, because the thing with Zeppelin, there's so much information that comes in and that has come in over the years and continues to. You know, there's now thousands of websites, you know, and lots of information gets misused, misinterpreted. So what I really wanted to do at this point in time was to really get all the facts, all the track by track, all the album by album, and update it in a way that made it as accurate as it could be, and also gave it a good reflection of how Led Zeppelin, you know, sit now as opposed to how they did 15 years ago or whatever. It's a very different market. You know, they've obviously had loads of new fans and you know, obviously a lot of younger fans.
We did actually mention sort of something along these lines earlier in the programme when I was talking to Judy when she was doing her Jukebox Gems. Sort of whereas we were talking about the classic rock era as we know it. You know, like sort of your bands like sort of like Zeppelin, Purple, Sabbath, and all that lot. You know, do you think like sort of that is the era of classic rock? Do you think like sort of that's it, sort of, and we won't have any more classic rock?
Well, you won't have it in the way it was presented. That's a sure fact, because again, one of the things about this book was that when I went back to the catalogue, I played the original LPs. Now that's very different from playing a CD, because you had side 1, you had side 2.
It was a totally different experience. Like sort of you're holding like sort of something which is at least 12 inches square, larger if you use the fold out. Plus you've got all the inner sleeves, and with the Led Zeppelin stuff. Like sort of, this is a really good time. Like sort of to talk about Led Zeppelin 3.
Well, it is, yeah.
And that little spinny wheel thing. That what was it called? It was a Volvel or something or other. It was based on something to do with crop rotation or something. Was it?
Yeah, I think Jimmy had seen some sort of crop rotation chart, and he wanted something that would be circular and that would focus on lots of different images connected with the band. It was a brilliant idea.
Yeah.
And he got Zakron to do it, who was an artist at the time who sadly recently died. Well, not recently, he died in January, but it's only just been released in the last couple of weeks that he died. So he was a fascinating character. He was quite an eccentric, and you know, I think he really came up with something special, which was, you know, if you look at that now, it's still an iconic piece of artwork.
Well, you couldn't do that with a CD sleeve, could you?
No. Well, again, you know, the whole packaging of music now is completely different.
Yeah.
You know, it's download, you know.
It's no good for people of our age.
No, I mean,
because they print the lyrics so small, you couldn't even read them.
You know, you need to get your glasses on. But, you know, in that era, and you've just said, was it the classic rock era? Yes, it was. And what's so fantastic about it is that it has stood up so well. Again, listening to those albums on vinyl, they sounded as fresh today as they did when they were first made. Just listen to Good Times, Bad Times. I've heard that track 100 times, thousands of times, but you just played it and it still sends, you know, tingles down your spine. It's still got that resonance of sound. And again, something that I've often honed in on, certainly in the book, Jimmy Page's production skills were just so way ahead of the time. You know, he had a brilliant ear for the sound, and part of the success of Zeppelin, without a doubt, is that fact he could reproduce that sound in the studio and make those albums sound so fresh. So it was a great era, and you know, you can look back on it, you know, with misty eyes and say it's not going to happen again. But what's great is that the music still stands up, and there's so many young kids. I've had, you know, young kids recently come up to me and say, you know, I want to get the albums. I must hear it on vinyl because that is how it was meant to be heard.
Yeah, but like sort of, but you know, they probably just want it on vinyl. Like sort of, they're not going to get into the Red and the Plum Atlantic labels and stuff.
No,
like
that might follow if they read my magazine and books. Because
what's the first album with on a Red and Plum now?
Well, if it's the turquoise cover, which was
the logo's a different colour, isn't it? As well,
you're talking about £700 or £800. But
you are kidding. Jeez.
Yeah, even you know, just a regular, you know, first version that came out on the Orange label is a good £50. You know, you know, in good condition, mint condition. But so you know, there's a fascination. Although you know, if you search around, you can pick them up for a good price. But they look so great, you know, and you know, they sound so great. So you know, what's not to like?
Well, absolutely. Anyway, we've just talked about the artwork for the third album. Let's play a song from it.
Indeed.
This is the Immigrant Song. That was Led Zeppelin and the Immigrant Song, probably one of the more boisterous tracks on Led Zeppelin 3, which I know many people, I think, Dave, like sort of considered to be more of a pastoral kind of album, don't you think?
Yeah, well, it was a bit of a turning point, really, because I think it proves that they could take on other formats of music and really make it their own. And obviously, we're talking about the acoustic influence. When they went to the college in Wales, in Brunellar, that was a key moment, really, because they'd been working very hard, they'd been touring hard, and it was the first time they'd stopped. You know, and Jimmy and Robert were able to go to that cottage, get a bit of tranquility, and out of that, you get That's the Way, Going to California, which came out a bit later, you get Friends, you get Poor Tom, you know, a totally different aspect to what they were doing, and I think that was, you know, they were very clever at doing that. They were very clever at soaking up influences and being in that tranquil situation, and many people, I'm sure, you know, have been there to visit it. It's quite an amazing place. And
it is actually somewhere that I've never been to. Mind you, like, it is in Machynlleth, so it's like sort of, we've got to go beyond Portmadoc and then down, like sort of the
down
coast.
South Snowdonia, yeah. But I think, you know, the fact that they were able to do that and then they went back there again, it was just the beginning of what I would call the ethereal Zeppelin. You know, that's where they brought in the light and shade, and where they could add on different facets, which really, within their structure, worked so well. And again, some of the tracks we've mentioned there, you know, Tangerine, That's the Way. It was, you know, I think people were quite shocked, and it did take a while, I think, for some of their audience to understand what was going on. But it was further matured, if you like, when they did the fourth album. So there was a natural sort of progression, if you like, of where these influences came in. But certainly I think Zepp 3 was a turning point, because it proved they could do whatever they liked, and the fact that it was so well received, and I think it stands up really well. It's not one of the obvious albums that people go to.
No, well, four I think is probably one sort of that would be the obvious draw, sort of, because probably of Stairway to Heaven on it.
Yeah, of course it is. Yeah,
you know, but it was one of those things. If you actually found a sealed copy of say 4 or the next album, Houses of the Holy, it didn't actually have any reference to the band's name or the album title on it, even. No,
well, again, what we're talking about here, and again we touched on it earlier, is, you know, the presentation of Zeppelin was very crucial, particularly crucial to Jimmy Page, who went to art school, and I think he wanted to have, you know, a way of how they would be looked at, and they always coming up with different ideas. So when it came to the fourth album, you know, there was an idea to do 4 EPs, I think, at one time, and then it came to the sleeve, which, the great thing about them, and possibly the Floyd as well, is that, you know, if you didn't know what their music was and you saw those sleeves, you wouldn't know what it was. You just have no idea, because...
Well, you know, like, I have this rule, like, sort of about music and buying albums that, you know, that I see at car boot sales or something along those lines, that I haven't got a clue, like, sort of, what the music's like. And, like, sort of, I've applied this, like, sort of, since, you know, like, sort of the late 70s.
No, I can relate to it, yeah.
If there's a picture of the band on the front cover, the album is no good. You know, basically, like, sort of, it's all these arty ones, you know, the ones with the Roger Dean artwork and stuff along those lines. If you know, the Floyd, the Zeppelin stuff, there was never a photograph of the band on them, was there? You know?
No, and again, you're talking about the fourth album, which they had a battle with that because obviously it also didn't have a title because the title was made up of the four symbols.
What was the name of that album?
Well, in effect, and this is a great thing that happened, was in the music press at the time, they actually printed the four symbols' name, so you couldn't say it, but, well, it's always, to me, it's the fourth album. I mean, people have called it Four Symbols, they've called it Runes, they've called it Zoso. To me, it's the fourth album because it was the fourth, statement that they made, if you like. And
yeah, so it's Led Zeppelin 1, 2, 3 and 4, is it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess Zepp 4 is the easiest thing, but again, it was so brilliant that they came up with those symbols, which have had an enduring effect because, people have got tattoos of them, they've got, it's never died out, and they've often, the four of them, often went back to the three of them now.
Have any of the band members got these things tattooed on them?
That, I would think not. I just read something, actually. There's not a lot of tattoos in... I think probably Keith Richards might have a couple, but I think in those days... I never got around to getting one, but I'm quite pleased now, really.
No,
but,
no tattoos or piercings, thank you.
I think they can look great, but I think the whole thing... And then you get to the House of the Holy, which, again, was a very, very clever cover. The two children... going up the Giant's Causeway in Ireland.
Yeah, that was obviously like a hypnosis kind of thing. With, as you say, that was the kids going up the Giant's Causeway. But sort of, am I right in saying that was just two kids?
Yeah, they were reproduced. But it was two, Stefan and I should know the other name.
Don't fret.
They
don't want dead air.
Hang on, I've got it. Stefan and Samantha Gates, it was, and in fact, Samantha Gates was also featured on the back of the present sleeve. She was schoolgirl. But I had Aubrey Powell came here one time to film some sort of Zepp memorabilia that they were using, and he signed a lot of my albums. And one of the things that he put was when he came to sign that album, he said, "This is the best thing we did." House of the Holy, I think, because it was so out there, because it was so different to anything else they did. I think it had a real resonance. And the fact that it, again, had no words on, although there was a bit of a cop-out because Atlantic did request that they put a band round it, and there are the early copies, which again are worth quite a lot of money, have got the band round, which says
it's like an obi almost.
Yeah,
wasn't
and
it?
I think the other thing, it was able to cover up some of the nakedness, which obviously some of the record shops at the time weren't keen to promote. So, but it's all a long time ago. But it still, it stands up as a fantastic sleeve. It really does.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, let's go back to the Welsh connection here. We are actually going to play Bronner Aur Stomp. That was Bronner Aur Stomp, and Bronner Aur, of course, was a little cottage that Led Zeppelin used to stay at, and that's close by Machynlleth. So, Dave, what's next on the agenda?
Well, I might point out actually that Robert Plant still does that track. He did that when I saw him at the London Forum 6 weeks ago, so I think that's a track he's pretty proud of.
Cool.
I think we're up to Z4.
Yes. Yeah. So we've figured out lots of that. We don't really know what the title of it is, but but we will refer it to as Led Zepp 4.
Yeah, some great stuff on.
It did. Yeah. While that track was playing, we were actually talking about getting one of the Rolling Stones campaign on the next track they're going to play, Rock and Roll. Yeah, that again, I think what was great by that time, they were so respected. Other musicians did want to play with them, and Ian Stewart, who was the Stones piano player, the sixth member, if you like, was a big fan of Jimmy, and came down, to Headley Grange where they were recording because they used the Rolling Stones mobile, so mobile studio. So he was around, and Rock and Roll just came out of a jam. They were doing a bit of a James Brown thing, Keep a Knockin', Little Richard, and they got Ian Stewart doing the barrelhouse piano, and within 15 minutes it was written, and that was how creative at that point, they could be, and that was a testament, I think, to the whole way they worked, and it was fantastic that they used, him on that, and then you've got the next track, and again, this is so Zeppelin, then you go from Rock and Roll to Battle of the Evermore. I know.
How does that happen?
It was Sandy Denny, yeah.
Mac Divison bringing Sandy in was again such a deft touch, and I remember Jonesy saying to me once when I talked to him, there was often different instruments that they wanted to bring in, and it was always, Jonesy will play it, so he'd have to go away and learn, in this case, the mandolin. So it was just great the way they were able to do that. And again, it's worth mentioning John Paul Jones is such an integral part of their success, and I think sometimes that's pretty underplayed. And you know, he's so active now. You know,
Well,
so
when I was looking up stuff, like sort of, you know, to talk about this evening, I'm sure I saw a picture, a fairly recent photograph of John Paul Jones, and is he playing a violin?
Yeah, he is. Yeah, I saw him do that. That was only 4 weeks ago in a London club with an electronic noise duo that he's got called the Minibus Pimps, which is completely out there. So he's doing that 1 week, then he's with C6 Steve, obviously did them Crooked Vultures. Mm-hmm. Jonesy's just, you know, a musical magpie. He just picks it up and runs with it. And
yeah, because he was a session musician before.
Well, again,
Zeppelin,
yeah, I
wasn't
mean,
and he does arranging and stuff along those lines, isn't
as he will say, he was able to bring those skills, and because Zeppelin was such a sort of democratic thing, he was able to bring in what he needed to bring to it. So, you know, without Jonesy, you wouldn't have no Corder, and, you know, without him, there's a lot of the deft touches that came in, you know, on keyboard and, you know, other instruments, mellotron, that made it happen. And particularly in the latter era, when, you know, things are beginning to slow down a bit, you know, he becomes very dominant, you know, particularly in the last album, Into the Outdoor, which, you know, was very led by him. So it was often his musicianship in the studio and live that really carried it. But something like Battle of the Evermore, as I said, you know, was such an amazing thing to do, and you get that contrast. You know, we've just talked about that Light and Shade, and that From Whisper to a Scream, which is such, you know, such an apt title for the book, and then you've got something like Rock and Roll, which is just, you know, it's off the cuff, and it just sounds.
Well, and Black Dog, you know, like they've got a great opening track to that album, you know.
It's just
hang on to your hat, you know.
It's all there, and you know, when they did it live, it was the opening number for, you know, a number of years, and you know, it's such a statement. I mean, you know, Rock and Roll, you just can't go wrong, can you? It's just, and they could just do that in their sleep, you know, and that's how they did it. It was just off the cuff, bang, it's there, let's do it. 3 minutes 40 seconds, let's go. Fantastic.
Oh, is that my cue to press a button?
It probably is.
I may as well do then.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Now that's what Led Zeppelin was about to me.
Absolutely.
Rock and roll. So, right, we're not really kind of sticking to very much to chronological order as such, are we, Dave? We're just bouncing back and forth.
Just go wherever it needs to go.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, anyway, the next track we're going to play is from the fifth album, which was, of course, Houses of the Holy. But let's just skip a little bit and go on to talk about, let's say, Physical Graffiti and Presence. And again, with the artwork and stuff along those lines, with those things, they again were standout pieces. Physical Graffiti, obviously, with the die cut, lots of windows in the sleeve.
Yeah.
And then this weird thing with Presence. What was that black thing?
Well, it was the obelisk, the Presence. It was. I mean, again, it was so Zeppelin. It was so. What the hell is it? Why is it? I remember Sound had about 3 pages of trying to work out. In the end, what was it? It was just a great piece of artwork, which, you know, attracted people, similar to the way, you know, Pink Floyd Wish You Were Here did. But the music inside it was, you know, quite a revelation, because that was very much a short, sharp, you know, no messing album. You know, there were lots of things that happened. Royal Player had a car accident, they couldn't tour, and all the energies that they had, you know, for the tour were put into the album. And you've got Achilles' Last Stand, you've got For Your Life, you know, it's a real no nonsense, you know, and it's a. I think, certainly Jimmy Page, I think, often says that is the one, because it was made under difficult circumstances. So by that time, you know, things were beginning to go wrong. You know.
Well, is that because that Presence was 76, and,
yeah,
and then later on in the year, they brought it out the album. The Song Remains the Same, which was the soundtrack to the movie which came out of the 1973 tour, I think it was.
Yeah.
And then there was just nothing until In Through the Outdoor.
Well, obviously, you know.
So was this all down to Robert Plant's?
Well, yeah, the Zeppelin story, and you know, I always say when they walked off stage after playing at Earl's Court for 5 nights, that was the end of the glory years, because the next 3 years were difficult. You've got the situation of Rob Plant having his car crash. You've got the terrible situation of his 6-year-old son dying in 1977. Mm-hmm. You know, that could have well been the end of Zeppelin. I know he's talked about, you know, since then that he wanted to go off and be a teacher or completely give up it all, you know. But he didn't. He was coaxed back, particularly by John Bonham, and there would have been no In Through the Outdoor. If that hadn't happened, there'd have been no Nebworth or the Europe tour. You know, Zeppelin still had new places to go, and I think In Through the Outdoor, again, was an album that was trying to get them back on track. You know, they hadn't played for a long time. And when I went to Europe and saw them play the Europe tour, which is a very low-key tour, they were definitely trying to rejuvenate themselves. And it's such a tragedy that, you know, John died when he did, because I think there was a future for Led Zeppelin in the 1980s, and I think it would have been very interesting to see what had happened. It didn't happen, and we're left with those albums. And you know, Into the Outdoor, which I think has some fantastic stuff on. You know, there were still great places for Zeppelin to go. So, you know, and again, it's just such a shame that it didn't. And earlier, you know, Jamaica we talked about, you know, that's such an off-the-wall track on, you know, House of the Holy. Great drum sound. Again, John, you know, had such a great sound, and they were just great. You know, there was also a lot of humour about Zeppelin, which people don't get at times, but I think Jamaica, which, you know, is the old English music hall joke, I don't think the Americans got that, but it was a 50s thing that sounded a bit reggae-ish.
Go on, do the joke. Lots of people understand it.
I
say.
My wife's gone on holiday.
Jamaica?
No, she went of her own accord. Boom. Blimey, we could be a double act. On that note, but
maybe not.
It got slaughtered in the press because people didn't understand. But I mean, looking at it now, it's just a great fun track. You know, Zeppelin didn't have to be all about 20-minute drum solos or whatever. You know, there was a lot of you know, humour in there, and I think again that track is such a great track, and it nearly became a single. I mean, I think Plant was very keen to put it out, and there's always a story he tells of, you know, we'd go on top of the Pops, but it wouldn't be us; it'd be someone else in front of us, and then you know, the scenery would fall down and we'd be playing. You know, it was like, you know, let's, you know, take the mickey out on top of the Pops, which lots of bands wanted to do at the time.
It was a good marketing tool, though. At the end of the day, let's face it. And the performances are priceless.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even though they were mimed, you know, those backing tracks, were specially cut. And I just wish that a lot of the late 60s and early 70s performances were still available. So much had just been trashed because it was all done on VT. And because it was so expensive a format, that they just used to record over them.
No, they just found that David Bowie one last year, which was amazing. But, you know, Zeppelin on top of the Pops, well, that would have been a novelty. Quite how their fan base would have taken at the time. I think I'd have been all right with it. Cause,
well, the irony is that they used to use, it was CCS's version, I think, wasn't it? Of
A Whole Lot of Love
is the theme tune, yeah.
Quite ironic, but I'd have been quite happy with it because I'd have seen Zeppelin anywhere, anytime. Simple as that.
Yeah, just can't get enough of the good old rock and roll on the TV, can you? No.
It's all good.
Anyway, Dave, time is marching on. We really have been talking, and I won't say talking too much, because we can never talk too much about stuff.
Indeed
but
not.
I think we're probably going to have to play out with Dear Maker, to be quite honest with you. But let's just talk about the book and our very, very generous publisher, both yours and mine.
Oh, good.
You know, they generally to give us prizes, to give away on the show. So I think that you might possibly like to set a little competition question for our listener.
Okay.
To win a copy of said book. And what would you like to set as the question?
The question is, where did Led Zeppelin play their last shows in England? Which location did Led Zeppelin play their last shows in England?
Right. If you want to enter the competition, you should probably just send us an email. I think that's the easiest way of going about it, to studio@monfm.co.uk, and in the subject line, if you just mark it Led Zepp, and we will pick that up. We will draw the winner out of a hat next week, and we will send a copy of the book to you. That's Dave Lewis's new book about Led Zeppelin, called From a Whisper to a Scream. Right. Where were we?
Just before we go, if I can just mention
a
few things. The book is available actually from my website, as is the Type of Loose magazine, which comes out 3 times a year. The website, www.typeofloose.co.uk, and you can find all the TBL products on there. You can find us on Facebook as well under Type of Loose, Twitter on Led Zeppelin TBL. So, as I say, my magazine comes out 3 times a year. The book's available now. And for Led Zeppelin, it just rolls on. The world of Led Zeppelin is ever in the present tense, and it's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Well, thanks for joining us, Dave. I hope that Simon will be kind to us and will edit this show down and we'll put it on Mixcloud for people to listen again.
That's great.
And of course, like I said, we wish you every success with the new book, From a Whisper to a Scream, and with future projects as well. I think lots of you've got another book on the go at some point.
Yeah. We've got the Nebulous book coming back out, and obviously the new magazine's coming out. So it'd be great to come in and talk again.
Yeah, let's sort of. Well, I think let's sort of. We do actually have things to talk about. Let's sort of on the telephone and via email. I think let's sort of. I may have a few little tidbits about certain project that John Bonham worked on in 1972 that you'd like a little bit more information on. So
yes,
let's sort of. That'll be good to talk about that.
Yeah, I'll be fascinated on that. Look forward to it.
Anyway, let's sort of. We are going to play out with your cue, Dave.
Jamaica of her own accord.
Anyway, thanks for joining us, Dave.
It's been a pleasure.
All right, all the best, mate. See you now. Bye-bye.
Cheers.